everybody. Welcome back to Shannon's Lumber Industry Update. This is episode 74. And this week I'm talking to a local tree removal and sawmiller and arborist, Caleb Darnell. He runs CD's Trees out of Hot Springs, Arkansas. We had a great conversation about this whole idea of local lumber, and we got a great peek into really a full source solution from the guy that's coming out and diagnosing how to drop the tree all the way to deciding how to saw the log into boards and reselling it and even building things on commission from the lumber that he fells himself. So without further ado, I want to welcome to the show Caleb Darnell. He runs a company called CD's Trees. He's down in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and they are at face value a tree removal company. If you look at their Instagram account, you might think they're a tree removal company, or you might think it's some sort of circus act, because the amount of high wire, like trapeze work I'm seeing on that Instagram channel is crazy. Like, you guys need like juggling or something to go with it. It's impressive. So officially, welcome to the show, Caleb. I'm really excited to hear about your business and kind of tap into your knowledge of local trees. So welcome aboard.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor.
Well, Caleb reached out to me on Instagram because I feel like I've been preaching native woods and local woods lately. And I just continue to get more and more excited about it as I talk to arborists and tree removal guys and sawmill owners who are kind of excited to have a voice, excited that there's some interest in some of their wood. So Caleb, tell us a little bit about your business, maybe a little bit of your origin story and what your business looks like today.
All right. Well, you touched on it just a little bit there. We spend a lot of our time in the arboriculture field, so a lot of tree removals, preventive work, cabling, pruning, things like that. All total, I've got about 14 years in that industry. 12 of it now here in Hot Springs.
Okay.
And without
Beautiful
getting
part of the world, by the way. Absolutely love that area.
It is wonderful here. Without getting too much into the tree service side of things, that's a whole nother industry. That can be another conversation. That is a great source of, logs for milling. I started probably 8 years ago with a 20-inch Alaskan sawmill. Mm-hmm. It is brutal running one of those. I think I threw my back out one time running it, and that was the start of reclaiming wood. Beyond just like firewood. Single-use reclamation. I didn't produce a huge volume. At that time, I had not even owned a skid steer yet, so it was quite challenging getting logs out of yards, getting them on a trailer, hauling them back. And when I finally got a skid steer, that just opened up a whole nother world of possibilities. I could start getting logs out of people's yards without, destroying their yards by dragging a log with a truck. And started salvaging logs over the last maybe 4 years. I've tried several other small sawmill outfits around here, trying to get people to mill a decent volume for me, but they all had basically other jobs and they were kind of doing this on the side, and I wasn't getting the volume that I needed to build up inventory. And a little over a year ago, we took delivery of our sawmill, a Timber King 1220, and nice. We really started ramping up. I have a friend that has a little bit larger mill than mine, and occasionally when I can't mill something, or if I want to get big wide slabs, I'll have him bring his mill out and he'll mill for us.
What's your capacity on that, on your mill?
28 inches at a maximum for like cutting slabs. If I'm going to turn a log into a cant and then cut dimensional lumber, I think I can start out with maybe a 33 or a 34-inch
Okay.
log, um, and that's a big log.
Yeah. That's a heavy log.
It yeah, it sometimes you kind of got to wrap your mind around the numbers. You're like, 28-inch log. That's, I want a 40-inch wide slab, and you're like, well, yeah, we'll go walk up to a 28-inch log and just see how massive that is.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah, that's actually a really good point because I hear a lot, people say, I'm hiking through the forest or driving through the forest, and there's a lot of, real skinny trees out there. And it's kind of like if you were to walk up and run a tape measure around that quote unquote skinny tree, you might be really surprised. Or I hear of a lot of people who see active logging and they're shocked at quote how small the trees are that are being cut down.
mhm.
They're not that small, actually. Yeah, you may be only getting a 12-inch wide board out of it, but that's still a pretty significant tree. And I imagine, as you discovered, especially before the skid steer, they're nearly impossible to move, like in log form. When you're getting boards now, you can't bucket to length. So it becomes a whole different ball of wax to move that thing around. Not just getting it out of the yard without tearing it up, but just getting it up onto the sawmill is a bit of an issue.
Yeah. Um, and our sawmill, it's a ground set. It's not a portable
Mm-hmm.
sawmill. So I only need to lift a log maybe 8 inches, 8 or 9 inches to get it up onto the mill. Uh, but our bigger of our two skid steers, we can lift about 4,000 pounds with it. So I can get a pretty good size log up on that
Nice.
mill.
That's fantastic. So the well, you started out just taking the trees down, and let's talk a little bit about that. Why are the trees coming down? What kind of trees are you removing, and why? I guess.
Yeah, there's a pretty good range of reasons for removals. Um, Storm damage can be
Mm-hmm.
one. That doesn't come up all that often. Uh, Dead trees is a pretty common removal for us,
Mm-hmm.
or trees that are on the way out. That maybe construction damage. Um, they put a new pipeline through, ripped up a bunch of roots, and then the tree is just a steady decline in its health,
Yeah.
and gets to a point where people don't want the risk anymore of this tree, near their home.
Sure.
Um, Lot clearing, we don't do a whole bunch of that, but uh, there's a lot of construction going on here in Hot Springs, and occasionally we get into a lot clearing that needs to be a little more surgical. I would say, a big excavator can knock trees down, without any effort, but if we've got a lot of structures nearby, sometimes a machinery operator says, "Nah, I don't feel comfortable pushing these trees over," and that's when we come in, with more surgical precision. We can get these trees down without any collateral damage.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, but on that construction side, there's a lot of that. People will make a remodel their house, a little add-on, and they need to take a tree down. Um, One that is a reason that is fairly annoying to me is when they say, "I'm tired of the leaves."
Oh,
I, you'd
yeah.
be surprised how often that gets said.
I've heard that one in
Um,
my neighborhood a few times. You see the tree
yeah,
truck show up, and you're just walking the dog, and like, oh, taking a tree down. What's wrong with it? Oh, I just hate raking the leaves, and I very quickly walk away. I'm like, I can't say something nice. Just walk away.
yeah, and you know, uh, and I'm not alone in this struggle. A lot of other arborists, we get caught in this. We have a idealized, image of the world where no, we don't have to remove anything. We're just going to preserve everything. Well, that's not realistic. In a lot of cases, when it comes down to somebody having to choose, between the tree or their home,
Hmm.
yeah, they're going to choose their home.
Sure.
And so a scenario like that would be, roots getting into septic lines, or roots as they increase diameter. over their lifespan, they can start lifting concrete slabs,
Right.
cracking, brick foundations. Um, and so, we push as hard as we can for preservation, but that doesn't always meet the goals that are trying to be achieved.
Sure.
Um, and because of that, if I said one day that I will no longer be doing removals, the next day I'll probably be hanging up the closed sign, because that is a the bulk of our revenue stream is
Yeah.
removals. And uh, back to kind of the beginnings of me milling, there were there were so many trees that I just had to cut up into firewood chunks to be able to get them like on a dolly and get them rolled out of a yard, that it was just it was starting to wear on me. I was like, man, I'm wasting a lot of potential, beautiful lumber.
Hmm.
And just one thing led to another. Patience, but having a goal off on the horizon that I don't know when I'm going to get there, but that's where I'm headed, and I know I'm going to get there. And things are lining up more rapidly now on being able to salvage all this wood.
Sure. So how does that change your approach to, your average removal? Obviously, you can't. I mean, I've seen a lot of tree companies come and do things in my own neighborhood around the area, and you kind of buck the standing tree, and you're pulling down little pieces by little. You're not actually felling the big, huge, long, tall thing, because in many instances, you don't know what's under the ground. If you drop a whole trunk, you may shatter structures underground. It's obviously a lot more precision required to fell a full tree. But when you're thinking in terms of lumber and you're trying to preserve as much of that central bowl as you can, how does that change? How does that change I mean, imagine that would change your entire business, and how you approach it and how you take it down.
Certainly, when I show up on bids now, I'm seeing saw logs.
Yeah.
And uh, one thing that I always have to keep in mind is, first and foremost, it's safety is our
Yeah.
largest overriding theme. Um, I don't want to get hurt. I don't want my guys to get hurt. They don't want to get hurt. I don't want to hurt anybody passing by. So safety is number one. Uh, Second is property damage. And then either third or somewhere down that list is salvaging logs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if we were actual loggers out in the woods, then it's we fell whole trees, we buck them, get our good logs out of them. But by harvesting these trees out of an urban environment, I have higher considerations. Um, Most of the time, I can get at least 8 foot logs off of trees.
Mm-hmm.
Occasionally, they're in such a tight spot that we have to, block a trunk down, 3 or 4 feet at a time. When that happens, it's firewood. If it's a hardwood, if it's pine, it's pretty much trash. Um, and occasionally, we will bring a crane in, and that will allow us to pick out larger trunk sections and salvage some wood. But
Right.
the cranes are so expensive that on a lot of, like, pine, a lot of the oaks, they're low enough dollar that I wouldn't bring a crane out just to get a couple of logs
Yeah.
um,
That's a
out of a
walnut trip.
tree.
Much more of a walnut
Exactly,
trip. Yeah.
exactly.
That's interesting. So, have you found that? I mean, certainly, I'm glad you kind of prioritize things like that, and certainly the saw log thing is way down the list of priorities, because I imagine that would actually change your bid as well. I'm just thinking of, the few times I've had to have a tree removed, and I've had a couple guys bid on it, and I'll get this, dramatically varying price, and it's because one guy had access to a skid steer and the other guy didn't, so it becomes a labor issue. But when you're actually trying to maintain a long section to be sawn into boards, I would imagine certainly the safety issue goes way, way up, or the risk goes way, way up at that point. The labor to move it goes up a fair bit. And I imagine the time to remove it would change as well. All that equals money, right? To the homeowner, to whomever you're moving it for. Have you found that becomes a factor? Let me clarify. My ulterior motive here is, I would love to see more arborists doing what you're doing, but I wonder what's the sustainability of it. You got to run a business. Can you be competitive? In other words, compared to the guy who's just chopping it up in firewood and taking it down faster, taking it down safer.
Yeah. So, most in my specific line of work, the cost of removing these trees in an urban setting. So we've got power lines, houses, roads, infrastructure in the ground, gas lines, sewage, irrigation. That in a lot of cases, we may have some large oak or some large pine that may take a solid 2 days of climbing to remove this tree. Well, we start factoring in, I got a crew of, 3 or 4 or 5 guys, skid steer, dump trailer, chipper, chip truck, all this equipment involved and personnel, that the cost of getting that tree down and hauled out is far greater than what you could, like, say, take that log to the mill and sell it for,
right?
By the ton. And because of that really doesn't affect the cost of the removal.
Okay.
Because the cost of removal is so high. Now, if somebody said, "Hey, I've got 20 acres and about 7 of it is nice big walnut trees," well, we're that totally different.
Yeah, sure.
I may be paying them money to go get their trees, and so it doesn't, if I'm hauling off tonnage, that accrues, an expense, wear and tear on the vehicles. Of course, anybody that's seen the price at the diesel pump right now, that's a pretty high cost at the moment. But that doesn't, I still want to salvage this wood as much as possible. I don't want to see it go to waste. And a very high percentage of our work, people don't have the desire, the means, or anything to deal with this wood on their own. Not everybody just has a sawmill and a tractor or a skid steer laying around.
I think there's also perception that not every tree is worth sawing, and there's some truth to that. Not every tree is worth sawing, but I think the general public doesn't realize that there could be value from this. The fact of the matter is the value is probably a lot lower. You get these guys, I get phone calls all the time at the lumberyard. I've got this tree, how much do you want to buy it for? Buy it from me for? And I'm like, it's the other way around, my friend. You're going to have to pay someone to remove that tree. It doesn't, the value is so far downstream from the log that it doesn't quite work that way. So there's a lot of folks who don't even really think of that tree in their backyard could actually be turned into boards, which maybe there's some re-education that needs to happen there. But I certainly don't think somebody in your line of work is looking to recoup costs from a removal by making boards. It's almost a separate business in itself, I would imagine. You have to build an inventory, you have to saw an inventory, and really the benefit, I suppose, is your material kind of sort of doesn't have cost. If you think of it as the sawmill is a separate operation and your tree removal is feeding the material to the sawmill, and as long as you're operating in the black, on the tree removal side, and you're not requiring profit from the boards, in other words, to pay the guys on the crew and all that stuff, essentially that lumber, that log, has no cost. I'm rolling my eyes a little bit when I say that, but
Yeah.
but at least the raw material that's you're going to get fed into that sawmill is you're not having to buy it from someone. In other words, so that can be somewhat enticing, and that kind of leads to a whole other issue. I saw one of the more recent pictures on your Instagram feed was of your log yard. You were developing a log yard. You're developing a near inventory of logs. So I'm curious, when you get a job to remove a tree and you've gone and you've looked at it and you've determined, okay, we'd like to try to, make some boards out of this. Let's try to salvage this log as much as we can. What kind of turnaround time is it from when you felled that tree to when you actually would saw it into boards?
That's a hard question to pin down right now. If the customer is wanting something out of that tree, so sometimes we make a deal where we'll cut the tree down, and we did this recently, a little lot clearing. I've called it a lot clearing. We cut 3 trees down, 2 sweet gums and I believe a white oak, Quercus alba. And we sawed the oak, some slabs, like some 2-inch slabs. I think some 1, maybe 1 1/4. And we're making a fireplace mantle for them, and then a sliding barn door type door. I think for their bedroom. And in that scenario, I'm going to want to not bury those logs so that I can get them milled quickly, start the drying process, and get that stuff built for them faster. But if there's no specific project, for a log,
Right.
it gets stacked, and we get to it someday.
Sure.
Because this is, and I think you kind of hit on this already, the sawmill end is pretty much a whole nother industry. We're still dealing with trees, but it's totally different.
Yeah.
And I'm, learning as I go. And one challenge I'm trying to overcome right now is I'm wanting to hire somebody full time. This is 40 hours a week, indefinitely, to start running this mill so that I can have a shorter time frame between when the logs hit the shop and get them milled and stickered and stacked.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely, and it's a different crew and a different skill set than what your current staff is.
Yeah. So right now, kind of the way we're operating it, our mill is under an awning on the backside of the shop, and if rain isn't getting driven in sideways, we get rained out on tree work. Well, we can go run the mill, or we can do other stuff inside the building. So right now, we're kind of filling in our slow time on the tree service, but things are getting to a point now where I need somebody full time, dedicated to the mill, and then other duties associated with the mill.
Yeah.
A 40-hour work week, they might only run that mill for 15 or 20 hours, and then the other time is cataloging, stickering, stacking, moving stuff down into the field, all that, selecting logs for filling, custom orders, lot of other duties other than just operating the mill.
Right. So in your current business, because like for instance, you just mentioned the customer that you're making a door and a mantle for. So you're actually doing some woodwork at the same time. You're building things from these boards that you're making.
Correct. We have a few other artisans around the area that, for the short term, we're having them build some stuff for us because they already have the experience. They have the tooling. For me to have a full blown woodworking shop, I needed another $100,000 or so.
Yeah.
To get it outfitted, and
staffed.
That's something that will be, and staffed. So that's something that will happen gradually over time. So in the meantime, we can hire local talent, and I try to keep things as local as I possibly can.
Right.
and some things we're doing in house, like we do a lot of epoxy, like the river tables.
Mm-hmm.
I've been casting pine cones in epoxy and having our guy turn bowls out of them. Um, and so, on my end, personally, I don't have a lot of woodworking experience, so that's something that I call it the slow boil. I just very gradually, tinker around with things. I know I'm going to make lots of mistakes.
Yeah.
Get them made. Learn these things, um, and kind of let that be the slow boil on gaining experience. And
So you're telling me that you actually sleep at night instead of just keep working the whole time? God, where's your commitment? I mean, come on.
no, some nights I can't turn my brain off because I'm thinking about some project or something.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it's particularly interesting, and I love kind of the direction you're heading, but also kind of where you are now. For lack of a better term, outsourcing it to local craftsmen, building kind of a small community, a cooperative effort here. If you think about it, it's kind of the way it was done for thousands of years. The village economy, that's how it worked. And because of that, there was a great understanding of the resources at every step in the chain. So this goes back to this kind of this re-education that, you've got a tree grower in your yard, or you walk by this tree every day on your way to work, and in the middle of a town somewhere, that tree could actually have a life after, it comes down. That's the other re-education is I think a lot of people tend to think trees are, they all live for thousands of years. No, they're not all sequoias. They don't live that nearly as long as people think. And in many instances, 30, 60 years sometimes can be normal for a lot of these temperate species. 100 years, certainly if completely left untouched. But in an urban environment, that's really, really unheard of. So the fact that one shop or one kind of cooperative of artisans, sawmill, tree removal guys are giving life to this material, this tree that was in Joe's yard now could be, a door, or could be a bowl, or both, or a spoon, all this stuff. And having kind of your business espousing this idea that there's more to just removing the tree. Like when the tree comes down, yes, it's not in your yard anymore for whatever reason. It doesn't, nor should it just get mulched or thrown into a landfill or something like that. There can be a life after that. And that's really where this whole idea of embracing domestic species, embracing native trees and hyper local sourcing gets really exciting to me. And I think whether you ever get to having a wood shop and guys actually building things from the board you're making or not, certainly that would be great for your own enterprise. But just the fact that you are producing boards and partnering with local artisans in order to make things, I think is a huge step in the right direction, frankly. So kudos on that. That's great.
Thank you. I know you've touched on it in some of your other episodes. This almost a decentralizing of, and it's not just the lumber industry. A lot of other industries seem to be doing this. Say the farmers market movement.
Yeah.
And we're seeing it. I think you called it. It might have been your last episode. Micro mills.
Mm-hmm.
And so say one big sawmill shuts down that was producing several million board feet a year. Well, that's a big gap in the supply chain that can get filled by 100 or 200, however many small sawmill operations
that are probably much closer to the source. That centralized mill producing 1 million board feet is then distributing it via trucks and rail to a bunch of other, retailers. Whereas you could take up that 1 million board feet from those bunch of different guys, but those bunch of different guys could be spread over, 100 square miles, 200 square miles, 1,000 square miles. and still fill the gaps in the demand part of the supply chain through local sourcing, which, I mean, you think about the overhead that is eliminated when you go that route. That's kind of fascinating. It's exciting.
Yeah. And if I was just thinking about this earlier, if I use the term local, I'm that's kind of very specific to basically the county that I live in. I mean, most of the work we do is in county, and we're talking, that's a pretty small area on this planet, and all this is happening, within that little area. Like you said, the transport costs are down. Stuff isn't moving as far. Not as much fuel's getting burned. Doing all this, and it's a byproduct from another industry that was already going to take place, and then we're just reclaiming some of this.
Yeah. I've got an episode that's going to be published. Well, at the time of this recording, it should be published in a few days. But the statistic that came out of that is there are 36 million urban trees felled annually, which is a significant percentage higher than what is felled through traditional logging practices from actual forests, concessions managed for boards. 36 million trees in urban environments are felled for any number of reasons. And we kind of touched on that. A lot of it is end of life, new construction, things like that. And with 36 million trees, the majority of them are going into landfills, are being mulched. And this urban logging movement, this idea is to stop that. Certainly some trees need to be mulched. Some trees don't end up making boards, and that's fine. We need mulch. We need firewood. Those are not bad things. But seeing like you said, bucking these trees when that there's quality boards in there, it's heartbreaking. So there's a huge opportunity, and this turns it into a grassroots movement. This idea that I, as a woodworker, want to build a cabinet. And, one of the first things I do when I design a project is think about, what do I want to build this in? Like, what species, what color palette, what am I kind of looking for? And lately, these days, I turn to, what's a wood I haven't used before? I'd love to get my hands into something unusual that I haven't worked before. And for many, many years, that used to be like, oh, look at these shiny exotics. This one's yellow, this one's purple, this one's, look at bright red. And we kind of went through that fascination. And now I've gone the opposite direction, and I'm looking for grain, and I'm looking for this local species that not only have I not worked before, but I could actually get it again. I haven't built a piece out of Macassar ebony. And maybe if I, sell my car, I could go buy enough Macassar ebony to build that piece, but then I'd never be able to do it again. Not only would I not be able to raise the money to do it, but I probably wouldn't be able to find enough Macassar ebony again to do that. And it's coming from the other side of the world, and let's not even get started on the ebony forestry. So this is something that we're not only finding new species, but we're tapping into a whole new supply chain that doesn't require, shipping across huge distances. And what I think is really cool, back to this kind of idea that there's this cooperative grassroots effort, I am supporting a local business who saw that log into a board. And I may be supporting a local business who actually felled that tree. And if I want, I can go see where that tree came from. Because here is at the root of a lot of the issues within the lumber industry right now is traceability, especially when we're talking exotics. And when we talk about environmental concerns and worries about, was that legally logged? How do we know if it was legally logged? Well, we need to trace it back to the stump. We need to verify that the board in my hand came from a log that came from this geotagged or branded stump in this forest somewhere in South America. Well, the longer that supply chain gets, the harder that is to do. When you're sourcing locally, and let's define it the way you did, within your county, traceability is easy. Yeah, it's on Joe's farm. See that spot over there on the other side of the fence? That's where it came from. Traceability is no longer an issue. which means all of the questions about sustainability, about responsible forestry, they kind of go out the window. Now, I mean, certainly it could have come from Joe's yard on the other side of the fence and not needed to be cut down. And that's not necessarily responsible harvesting, but it's also a heck of a lot easier to discover that. So a lot of these ideas of certification and FSC, all of that kind of becomes irrelevant because we know exactly where it came from. And we know who sawed it. We know the name of the guy who sawed it. We know what day of the week he sawed it on. It's a paradigm shift. And it kind of blows my mind based on the work that I do day in and day out at a lumber yard. It's so incredibly different. It's really cool to think about.
Yeah, and along with that, this whole grassroots movement, we've got some strengths, that are working in our favor. A lot of these large mills, they optimize the mills for a certain genus of wood, a certain size range of log, and if a log is too small or too large, they can't even utilize it. Whereas us small guys, if I say, okay, a 28-inch mill isn't big enough for what I need, I can go buy a larger mill, and I can start taking stuff that would never, ever, ever get milled in a more traditional large sawmill operation, and also I can choose this oddball stuff. I've later today, a fellow's going to drop off some Kentucky coffee tree logs that I'm going to mill for him. And I don't think I've even ever cut one down here in Hot Springs. This one was probably intentionally planted here. And we can saw logs that large mills wouldn't. There's not a lot of them growing, so a large sawmill may say, we don't want to mess with that because we're only going to get a couple thousand board feet cut this year, and that's not enough to supply any potential large demand for it, so they don't even want to fiddle with it.
Right. And if they don't have a demand for that species, you're essentially taking time. You're taking time away from the mill. The mill has a capacity of X per day, and you're going to run this random tree that they may never see again. That's X minus whatever the time is to mill that tree. The optimization that has to happen to run a large mill like that, and the automation for that matter that has to happen, does not allow for variation on the input end of things. And I'm glad you brought that up, because it's a major issue that we've seen highlighted, during the COVID pandemic, and the labor shortage that's occurred after that is mills were unable, they weren't agile enough to change what they were doing, to change their input source, whoever they're getting their logs from. And when that dried up, they basically shut down. They weren't able to pivot and do something alternative, because in order to change would require massive, like ripping back to the studs, to use a metaphor there. And that's an issue. Whereas the little guys, you're nothing but agile. Pivot is what you do all day long. And that's particularly interesting. So I guess while we're talking about kind of the ability to be diverse and that, what kind of species do you see down your way? Kentucky coffee tree, obviously, that's why they call it Kentucky coffee tree. Don't see it too much in your neck of the woods.
Exactly. So I'll kind of start at the top where, by volume, pine and oak are the dominant genus of our forests here.
And are we talking
in Arkansas.
Southern yellow, like Pinus strobus, or where are we? What do you call
I think
pine?
we've got some southern yellow.
Okay.
We've got some short leaf. I believe we have some long leaf. And then on the oak side, a lot of white oak, so the Quercus alba, Quercus rubra. Let's see, we've got a lot of willow oak, that's on the red oak side, post oak, decent amount of hickory, although I don't saw a whole lot of it. Um, Black cherry or wild cherry, decent amount of that. A lot of hackberry.
Hmm.
I've not sawed a whole lot of it, but I'm going to be playing around with it, trying to get some to spalt.
Yeah. That
Um,
shouldn't be too hard.
a little bit of no, no, not at all. A little bit of sycamore. We're mountainous here
Yeah.
with a lot of rock, a lot of shale, and any of the sycamore we have is usually down around creeks and whatnot. So we've got a little bit of that. Elm, a little bit of the American elm, winged elm. Not a whole lot of it. We have very little ash here. I think only 2.5% of our forests are ash. Uh, so we don't touch that very often.
You
And
might
we
you
do
might be better
have,
off, honestly. The way the ash
yeah,
borer
no,
is
we
eating
are.
up forests, I think you're probably safer that way.
Oh yeah, we've already been removing trees that have been killed by EAB.
Yeah.
Let's see what else. We every now and there's some oddball stuff. I've got a couple of pretty decent size black locust. No, it might be honey. I think honey locust logs. A little bit of eastern red cedar. Not a huge amount. We kind of got to start getting over towards Oklahoma to start seeing more of that.
Hmm.
Little bit of black walnut. Uh, I I'm always on the lookout for that.
Sure.
Uh, but the oak and the pine that's the predominant.
Yeah.
Uh,
No poplar though, huh? Too far west, I'm guessing.
I think so. Um, no, not really.
Yeah, I've never quite
Sometimes
figured out where the line is. Arkansas is, well, I mean, it's pretty central when you think about. Yeah, it's probably too far west. For
yeah. Well,
poplars.
even just within Arkansas, we've got a pretty wide range. You get down into the southern Arkansas, and it's all flat land, agriculture,
Hmm.
uh, swamps down
Yeah,
there.
you've seen your
A
cypress
lot of
showing up,
cypress.
and yeah,
and then here in central Arkansas, we're in the Ouachita Mountain Range, and so we start getting mountainous, and then we get into northern Arkansas, and we kind of start getting into the Ozarks,
yeah,
and things change again up there. A little bit different weather patterns, a lot more black walnut in northern Arkansas. Uh, we don't see much box elder around here, but we kind of start getting north of I-40, and it pops up a lot more. A lot of things will grow here if people plant them.
right.
Uh, but yeah, and anytime something oddball comes along, I try to save it and mill it and just see what it's like. I haven't found too many woods that aren't pretty.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah, they're all have some value somewhere. So what is your operation like? You've sawn it into slabs. How are you drying? Do you have kiln drying capacity? Are you air drying everything? How's that all work?
yeah, right now we're in a heavy buildup phase. We've been actively either milling ourselves or having other mills mill for us for the last probably 3 years, and I'm really not wanting to cheat the system. You can't fake high quality hardwood. Um, I think many people have attempted, but it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So we are long, slow dry down in the field at our shop, and we're hoping this summer sometime to have our kiln up and running. We're going to do a Nile dehumidification
Hmm.
kiln in a shipping container, and so we'll air dry the stuff, slow and natural, down to 20%
Yeah.
moisture content, and then move it into the kiln. Uh, so we've had a makeshift kiln in the past. It worked, but it was extremely slow, and we're not using that right now. So we do have some kiln dried in our inventory, and a lot of air dried in the inventory. So anybody doing hand tools, we got you covered.
Sure. So what is your inventory like? What is the size of your inventory now? Then any idea?
I've got to update my spreadsheet, but I think we're somewhere around between 8 and 10,000 board feet, I would
Really
say,
fantastic.
and we're very heavy on the live edge slab, trying to get a lot of that big heavy stuff milled early on because it takes so long to dry.
Right.
And here in the next several months, I'm going to start hitting real hard a lot of dimensionals. So 4/4, 5/4, square posts, things like that. More on the dimensional side.
And what is your
Um,
determination factor for when you would turn something into dimensional lumber? Are you deciding by species or like the shape of the log or what yield, etc.?
yeah. So I've kind of learned that when I set that log on the mill, at that point in time, I kind of need to start having some idea of the end product. So I need to
Yeah.
mill with something in mind down the end because, I mean, yeah, we can glue stuff together, but it's much better if I mill it very close to the dimensions that somebody wants to use.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so if we have a good clean log, the first log up from the ground, no knots, no defects, I will want to saw that into dimensional lumber. Uh, if we've got a real gnarly tree or higher up, say a big pine, we start getting into all the limbs, I might do like 1 inch, 1x6, knotty pine boards, or do slabs because when we're doing 8/4, 12/4 slabs, it's so massive that we're not a knot isn't going to weaken that slab
Right.
as compared to making a 2x4 out of it.
Sure.
Um, so that's a big factor is what condition is that log in. You know, if it has a lot of defects, then I'm going to go for fireplace mantles, live edge slabs, things like that.
Right.
Um, and so now I've got to bulk up the dimensional side. So for structures, building the legs for a table, or bookshelves, things of that nature. So
Interesting.
it's a learning process as I'm going.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, if you were to find that magic person who can run your mill all day long, someone that has that experience, they are absolutely have a milling plan when they're looking at that log. And some of the sawmill operators that I've known in the last decade, just where I've been working, they're amazing. They can, I feel like they just play Tetris in their head. They look at a log and they can
Mm-hmm.
immediately see how I'm going to twist it, what I'm going to get out of it, how I'm going to best yield, the best yield I'm going to get from that log based upon a specification I'm trying to meet. Because in many instances, kind of like the customer that you struck a deal with, that you take down the tree and make these things, you have a product in mind for that particular log, or you have a product in mind and you're selecting a log based upon that product in mind. So you're milling that whole log with the intention of netting very specific sizes, widths, lengths, etc. That's an amazing thing to watch. And a skill set that if you find, don't let go of it ever, because that one
Absolutely.
guy will make you a lot of money and save you a lot of money. Probably is the better way to look at it that way. It's really fascinating to watch someone like that work when you see them just making very intuitive changes to the orientation of the log or the thickness they're sawing, and they end up with just this stack of sticks that you have no idea how they did it. But you look at it and go, oh my God, like there, to use your earlier example, well, there's a leg, there's another leg, there's the first shelf,
Mm-hmm.
second shelf, holy crap, and you're right, they've sawn it like almost to the size that you need. You just need to go and, plane it and you're done. So that's fascinating. More than anything, though, and I'm glad we were able to get you on, just because it's interesting to hear what you're trying to do really is this end-to-end solution. You've got an intimate knowledge of the material that you're sawing because it was you and your crew that actually pulled it, out of the ground, or I don't know, you didn't
Hmm.
really pull it out of the ground, but you get the idea. Felled it from where it grew for the last however many decades, and you're sawing it into those boards. And man, I can imagine there's a certain amount of attachment that comes to this beautiful slab and getting to see it made into something. What a rewarding thing to see. That's really amazing. So I guess
Yeah.
the important thing is for those in and around the Arkansas area. I mean, do you have a showroom? Can people come by and look through their inventory? How are you getting wood into the hands of woodworkers like myself?
Yeah. So we do have a showroom. Our shop is located in an industrial park, and so we're in a good setting. We're not upsetting our neighbors, but we have a showroom that people can come look at things, talk to us about the projects they have. As of right now, we do not have a website, and we're kind of operating real heavy through our Facebook page, and we do have an Etsy store that we're just at the beginnings of getting that up and running. And of course, we got our Instagram and a YouTube channel, but the bulk of our communication with customers is happening through Facebook right now.
Okay, well that's good to know. And I urge people to look them up on Instagram because there is really some fascinating stuff. Some of the line work that you guys do is incredible. watching watching there was one I saw where you were removing a tree that grew through a deck, or the deck was built around the tree, and the
Yeah.
guy's standing under the deck. I don't know, that might have been you. I couldn't see who it was in the video, but sawing
Mhm.
this tree from underneath the deck, and when he breaks through, the tree just kind of disappears, just kind of lifts up out of the way, just floated away, because of the line work above it. It's really amazing stuff to see. But I'm looking at this your Facebook page right now, and certainly this is a way to get in touch. So I would recommend anyone, even close by. You know, we got 8,000 board feet of lumber sitting here waiting for somebody to build something out of it. That all has a story that Caleb will probably tell you where it came from as well, which is, I think, a particularly powerful thing to say as a woodworker, to build a chair or a table or whatever, and to be able to say, here's where it came from, and I could actually drive you to where the tree came from, is a very, very powerful thing. And I think we need more of that. We need more of this locally sourced thing so that we can all continue to tell that story. So very, very cool stuff, Caleb. Anything
Thank you.
else you'd like to say to kind of wrap this up?
Yeah. I kind of say some encouraging words to others out there on this journey. Um, in our fast paced society, we've kind of lost some of this delayed gratification. Putting in the hard groundwork for a payback. Temporary pain for long term comfort. And I'm at the beginning of this journey on the milling and woodworking end, but I've got 12 plus years prior to this of getting to this point. And it's easy to get discouraged in these endeavors. And there's guys ahead of me. I'm gonna say Matt Cremona. The guy's phenomenal on his broad skill set, and the time frame. Some of his videos span a year or
Mm-hmm.
more on producing a video. And so for everybody else, you know just stepping out on this journey, you know keep your goal in mind. Don't let little things discourage you, stop you. Machinery is going to break down. uh, People aren't going to show up, things of that nature. But just keep hammering. Don't be patient, but also be stubborn. and uh, it will pay off someday. You're going to look back and say, yeah, I'm glad I did all that, because it got me to where I'm at right now, and I like where I'm at right now.
That's fantastic. I like that. Be patient but stubborn. Very nice. That and I couldn't agree more, because I really think what you're doing, and this applies across multiple industries. I mean, we're talking about the lumber industry and the construction trade, but this grassroots sourcing and this kind of cooperative, idea, let's just call it that village economy, I think is going to become a bigger and bigger mover. But the
Mm-hmm.
cool thing is we have the modern technology to help enable it. We have the ability to source locally but sell globally, through things like the internet. We have the
Yeah.
technology to, in some ways, optimize and possibly automate some of our processes. We are able to tap into much, much larger networks. In many ways, that's the irony, right? I mean, you're sourcing within the county, maybe you're selling within the county, but people may have just learned of you through this podcast. You know, there's a guy down the road, maybe not down the road, but down somewhere in, southern Arkansas somewhere, who
Yeah.
just learned of a place up in Hot Springs where he can go buy lumber because he was listening to a podcast from some hack in Baltimore, Maryland. That's the exciting thing that I think we can continue to do. So, like Caleb said, if you're running a mill, if you're just getting into this, there is a place for you in the supply chain. And you may be just the guy that doesn't really want to sell it. I mean, you mentioned Matt. Matt doesn't really want to sell his stuff. He does sometimes, but he's doing it for his own projects. He's hoarding the lumber. Mark Spagnola and I often accuse him of being a bit of a hoarder. So,
That- that-
you know,
that's okay.
it's fine. At least he builds nice things, right? If he was just the guy that collected lumber and never built anything with it, then I might have an issue. So at least some of it is
Yeah.
getting used. But there are guys like Matt, and there are guys, like yourself when you got started, still running an Alaskan mill, that the enjoyment that comes from sawing a log, from opening up a log and getting boards from it, becomes kind of the hobby, to the point where now you have a whole bunch of wood. And now you're thinking, well, how am I ever going to make something from this? There is an opportunity there. There's an opportunity there for you to tap into the supply chain, maybe make a little bit of money, maybe not. I don't know. It depends on really what your goals are. But I think this idea of small sawmills and locally sourced lumber it's got legs, and it's going to transform the industry, I think.
Yeah. One more thought.
Sure.
The exotic wind industry gets a lot of attention. You've talked about it a lot. We even mentioned it earlier in the episode here. But here's an interesting thought. To all the rest of the world, the wood that we have here in North America is exotic.
It is exotic. Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. So it may seem plain to us, but to all the rest of the world, American wood or North American continent, native wood is exotic.
Sure.
So, we got some nice stuff here that doesn't grow, throughout the entire world.
And the funny thing is like Australia has out and out banned native timbers. You can't fell them. So there's a bunch of people going, well, where are we going to get our wood? They're getting it from North America. Like, they have nothing but an exotic lumber market right now because the native stuff, and I don't know how long, somebody's got to find the fault in that eventually. But yeah, exotic is all relative. Where you buy your lumber from, you could buy your lumber from 2 states over, and it's pretty darn exotic compared to, you tell you what, I'll send you some exotic poplar.
Ooh, nice.
From the East Coast. It's a commodity product out here. I think it probably have a shed with about 3 million board feet of poplar right now.
Wow.
Outside the window. So, we consider it just everyday, literally run of the mill type material. But apparently in Central Arkansas, and it's exotic material. So yeah, it's all relative terms, but it's,
Yeah.
it's a great point. It's a great point. And the more we can think of our wood as the primary source, our wood meaning domestic North American wood, think of that as our primary source, and begin to explore the rainbow of colors and grains that we have. Yeah, I think it's all going to end up being for the best. Yeah, I say that, and I work for a company that's still 60% exotic, but we're transforming too. So anyway,
Yeah, well, I call it growing a very large, hungry beast, and uh, a very large company like with the large mills can't just stop right in their tracks, turn on a dime, so to speak, and but those of us that can look forward and see changing trends and respond to those are going to survive and thrive.
and more importantly, there is a place in the market for companies that aren't big and don't want to be big. And I think there's this perception that success comes from you build your business and you grow your business and you franchise and you have X number of employees. And there are the majority of businesses out there that are perfectly content with a 4-person payroll. They have no desire to grow it to a 400-person payroll. And those companies, as you just said, have the ability to be agile, have the ability to see those trends, embrace those trends, be the early adopters, and they will drive the industry. And they have to stay there. So yeah, all the little mills, all the little sawmill owners that might be listening to this at this point, don't change. Keep doing what you're doing, because it's you guys that are making this lumber possible. I would not be able to buy sassafras if I just had to rely upon large commercial mills, because they won't touch the stuff. Kentucky coffee tree, forget about it. You're not going to be able to get that anywhere. But apparently they're going to for a rare moment, there's going to be some in Hot Spring, Arkansas. So act quickly.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm sawing it for him. He's not. I'm not buying the log from him. I'm sawing it, and then he's taking it with him. But I will be taking some pictures and probably post those. And in fact, just this morning, I milled a fireplace mantle out of a catalpa log.
Oh, nice.
And that was real pretty. I think that's the first catalpa that I've milled.
That is a pretty wood. And there's another one.
Yeah.
I've seen it in a retail lumber yard maybe once. And it was the same type of thing. It was a yard that has a sawmill. And it was just like they somehow, I think, like the people they were buying logs from, like, didn't know what they had. And they dropped off a bunch of cherry and whatever. And this catalpa was kind of thrown into it. Fantastic wood to work. Really enjoyed it. But, you can't go to a retail yard and pick that up, because it's not in the supply chain. And the big commercial mills don't know what it is, don't know how it is, don't know how to dry it, and they're not going to touch it. So yeah, it's important that the little guys continue to be there, and be stubborn. That's going to be our new bumper sticker for this episode. Be stubborn. Be patient and be stubborn. I like it.
Yep.
Well, Caleb, thanks so much for your time. It was really interesting to kind of talk to someone with your breadth of experience, not only in the removal, but down to the sawmill. And I think it's fantastic, what you're doing, recognizing you got a lot to learn, recognizing there's a long way to go, and just keep pushing. I think that's awesome. It's great.
Yeah.
So, folks,
thank you for having me.
If you're anywhere near Arkansas, you may have just found a new place to go buy some lumber. So, check out CD's Trees, and you can Google them. I just did, and I found everything. I found Facebook. I found the this is essentially your gallery right here. So yeah, a little bit of Googling will find it, but I'll also post links in the show notes to this episode. So go check out Caleb's stuff and check out his Instagram, and as I say at the end of every show, go buy some lumber, but go buy it from Caleb now.